Hello, dear Mindfulness Collective. This right here, right now, is the joy of being a live stream coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York. And if you're joining us anywhere other than twitch.tv/deepmindfulness, come on over. It would be lovely to see you. Not only should you come on over, but the likelihood is pretty considerable that we're actually switching entirely over to Twitch. So if you're seeing this on YouTube, if you're seeing this anywhere else aside from the replay, if you're seeing this live anywhere other than Twitch, you might want to mosey on over. So folks, how are you doing and where are you coming from? Where are you at? How are folks? What's going on? Where does this find you? This lovely Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? Today's Wednesday. We're back from our little trip. Hopefully it wasn't too disruptive to have us not present for a little while we recouped, Raquel and I. It was our anniversary. Was it our anniversary? It was our anniversary vacay. Not exactly our anniversary. I'm trying to fix this light. Where are you? There you go. Not exactly the anniversary. It was a combo anniversary work party trip, but it was nice. Scott Nesbin here from California. Welcome, Scott. Nice to see you, as always. Let's see here. Good morning, Rory from Kingston. Nice to see you here. Good to have you live with us. And folks, today we're going to be looking at a very important topic. This is something we talk about not infrequently. Sorry, here we go. There we go. Important topic, which is kind awareness and entering into a relationship with that kind awareness. Good morning from Brooklyn. That should be Jean, I think, is JGBK Brooklyn. Welcome, Jean. Nice to see you here with us. So we're going to be introducing kind awareness, which some of you might be familiar with, but it's always helpful to become reacquainted with. We want to look at, so when we're looking at meditation, we're looking at these two big fields. One we could call as deconstructive, one we could call reconstructive. And on the reconstructive side, Raquel and I consider kind awareness to be a pretty central tool in order to have a nice, rich, fulfilling life. So it's not just awareness, the awareness being the part of the mind that knows, experiences. It's also to add a tiny bit of kindness to that awareness. So as folks are peeking in here, rolling in, where are you joining us from? I realized before there's a dashboard where I can actually see where folks are coming, not location-wise, but which platform we're being joined from. Okay, we have 3 folks on Facebook. Welcome. We have one folk here from YouTube. So I just want to let folks know, if you're joining us in other places, we're going to probably rearrange the entire stream, so we won't be broadcasting on anything but Twitch coming pretty soon. That's pretty sure to be the case. So folks who are over there on Facebook, I know it's strange to leave one platform and come to another, but that is exactly what's being requested. Especially, Facebook is questionable sometimes. It's, I of course still exist on Facebook, as you can see, and we encourage folks to come on over. So folks, we're going to be meditating for about 25 minutes. I'm going to encourage you to find a nice, comfortable position that you can maintain for the duration of the sit. The way we do this is by arranging the body well. So arranging the knees so that they're lower than the hips. Balancing from the tailbone through the crown of the head, and then we will jump forward. As you practice, if questions arise, so 2 things will arise in practice, or maybe we could say 3 things. One is just unconsciousness. Totally understandable, happens to everybody. Another thing that will arise is a knowing experience. Okay, I'm knowing this experience, these senses are arising. That's important. You want to track that, whatever is arising, it's being known by the system. You don't have to memorize it or anything, but that can be helpful to me if after the meditation you want to report that. Third thing that can happen is questions can arise. I wonder what's up with this. This is sort of a weird thing. I'm not quite sure. And typically what happens is we drop the question and we get back to the practice. When that question re-arises, we want to, or when that question arises, we want to shelve it for now and then be able to ask it later. So we'll have time to give reports and questions after the practice. So for now, finding that nice comfortable position, don't know if you guys knew, but Raquel knocked over a tripod not terribly long ago, and we heard some sort of crack, but we couldn't figure out what it was, and it had cracked this bell striker in half. We have since repaired it, but it has a little crooked now, but this is my favorite bell striker because it just makes the best sound. So folks, finding that nice comfortable position. Morning, Nate. Good to see you here. Okay, folks, so finding that nice comfortable position, and when you're ready, we will begin. Is the mic working? So our microphone recorder is making some kind of adjustment. Did it work? I can't even tell if you can hear me. It now is recording, but it seems to be much, much, much quieter. Check, check. No, something's wrong. One sec, folks. Check, check. Okay, one sec. Check, check. Hello, check. Something is off. Okay, so something just went strange with our recorder. So let me check with folks. Can folks hear me? Am I audible to all other humans on this receiving channel? Just let me know if you can hear me right now. It's probably going to be a little quiet if you can hear me. Something just switched. Okay, I'm going to fix that in just 1 second. Not sure why it's so quiet. I'm going to fix that. Check, check. Okay, then we're back. Excellent. Check, check. Okay. Thanks for your patience, folks. Okay, so finding that nice, comfortable position. Yeah, perfect. Oh, the puppy. Babe, would you cage the monster? She can't. Raquel has noise canceling headphones. She can't hear me. Will you cage the monster? Thank you. Our puppy is itching to disrupt a meditation. She's trained well. Okay, so find that nice comfortable position, folks. We're going to jump right in. Give her a sec. She's fighting, she's resisting. Hey babe, she's trying to lure her into the cage. Will you just pick her up and put her in there? Thanks, honey. I know it's better if she goes by volition, but... Okay, great. Oh, we have some interesting entertainment here from Will Alexander Bethany. We'll take a look at that after the practice. Okay, so folks, find that nice comfortable position and we'll begin. Beginning by taking a few comfortable deep breaths, just feeling the body rise and fall. Each time we arrive at a meditation, we arrive with the momentum of all of the previous moments. In this case, we're going to contact all of that momentum, a mind that may be moving at a pace different than a meditation practice, a body that might be agitated. We're going to interact with this momentum by not doing anything. By not changing anything. Often in meditation, there's a lot of doing energy. In this case, we're not trying to concentrate. We're not trying to be aware. We're not even trying to do nothing. Not trying not to try. Sometimes the mind will try, make an effort. We don't have to engage with that. We don't have to stop that. We don't have an obligation to meditate or be better, to improve. The mind will think at times. That's not bad. We don't need to be anyone or do anything. Nothing to correct. If we imagine that we have 100 units of doing energy, we're not actively using any of them. The mind might begin to use some of that, but we're not engaging with this. We don't need to stop it. We don't need to invest in any doing. Sometimes we become unconscious, and that's part of an ordinary experience. It's not a problem. Getting a taste of not needing to interfere. Not needing to intervene. And as we proceed forward, knowing that part of this practice is to see how little efforting we can apply. Knowing that doing more than is needed can cause unnecessary turbulence. Without needing to clearly produce any mental imagery. Using a tiny, tiny bit of our doing capacity, maybe 1 unit out of 100. Just the subtlest sense, subtlest knowing. Subtlest imagining that there is a being in front of us, unspecific. Unshaped. Seeing how little efforting we need to apply for this knowing to occur. This subtle sense. Once we have contact with this sense of a being in front of us, seeing if we can let some of the doing fade away. It's possible the initial contact took more efforting than was needed to sustain this connection. the less effort we apply, the more nuance we can notice. This being is neutral. It's not one that we want to be present or want to go away. So we don't need to imagine a form or no detail about this being. Simply knowing its bare presence. Tuning into what is the experience of knowing this being. In other words, we're not trying to observe what it's like to create, to intend. And this is part of why we apply so little doing. We're observing the experience, looking at the nuance of being with. This neutral being. Now recognizing that this being, as bare and as subtle as our contact is with it. Recognizing that it is worthy of our kindness. It is worthy of love. Again, not needing to change anything, not needing to do more. Simply recognizing that by its very existence, this being is deserving of compassion. And noticing if all on its own there's any change in our experiencing of this being. So we don't need to add more doing. We simply need to know that there is a being that is deserving of kindness, of compassion. And simply observing what our system does. And adding a phrase. A phrase which rides on our experience of contact with this deserving being. Not trying to add anything to the experience, just letting this phrase rhyme elegantly with what's already occurring. And the phrase is simply, "May you be peaceful. May you be peaceful. May you be peaceful." Allowing the mind to whisper this phrase. you be peaceful. May you be peaceful. May you be peaceful. Not wishing in order to change. Simply providing what seems natural. This being which is deserving of kindness. Simply receiving kindness. We don't need to produce kindness within ourselves. We don't need to want things to be different. Simply the subtlest knowing of the deserving nature of this being. And staying with the practice, staying in stillness, letting the knowing of this being continue, letting the phrase whisper itself, and allowing a tiny bit of light to enter the eyes. Eventually allowing the eyes to rest on a single point as the eyes fully open. Letting this moment of transition, letting this particular moment be the great teacher that shows us how we might bring this knowing, this recognition of the deserving nature of any and all beings, including ourselves, and how we might bring this into every aspect of our life. Okay. So what was that like? What happened and what do you like now? Making any adjustments you need to allow the body to be comfortable. Yeah, what was that like? So I'd be curious because, of course, different people are going to have different experiences, different challenges are going to arise. Let me know in the old commenterinos That was challenging, fun, interesting, easy. None of the above. All of the above. Looks like I realize that every time we change scenes, we lose the chat from the previous section. So I'll read this thing that Will Alexander Bethany wrote, which actually, Will Alexander, we don't know where you're. I forget where you're coming from. Where are you located? A bit of poetry. Will Alexander will often drop us with a little bit of poetry. So walking is the equivalent of running up a mountain when it comes to exercise for crippled people, is what my aunt Litmus used to say. She lacks nuance, I think. Well, Auntie Litmus, oh, you know, a little bit of right, a little bit of wrong. What are you going to do? What are you going to do, aunts? Am I right, people? That's the equivalent of the, what's that phrase? In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Okay, Jean says, my body is all over the place today, so I did not find that easy, but I do feel calmer. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you for letting me know that you didn't find it easy. That's helpful. It's actually useful information for me. When you say your body's all over the place and you did not find it easy, let me know what you meant by that, because I can probably address it specifically. Hi Janusz, this is from Farzad. The phrase you mentioned, trying not to try, is actually a title of a book about early Chinese thought and the contrasting approaches of effort and non-effort. You may find it interesting. What's the name of the book? I'd be curious. Maybe Trying Not to Try. That is the name of the book. Yeah, well, what we're talking about here is a non-doing practice, which was sort of most emblematically espoused by Chan, by Zen. And so we're sort of starting out with a kind of non-doing practice, and we're adding the slightest little bit of doing in there. I really find that people who, Westerners, I guess I could say broadly, tend to overdo pretty dramatically. There's a lot of overdoing, efforting, and so learning how to practice without all of that extra doing reduces friction in the system, which is lovely. It's always nice to reduce friction just a bit. So yeah, lovely. Thank you for sharing that. Trying not to try. Excellent. Yeah, there's a practice called Shikantaza, which even the description that I gave might be a lot more description than you usually get in a system like that. Rory says, my mind is busy today too. I found myself wondering why we were focusing on something imagined. I'm curious about that. Well, so this is an interesting piece here, is that in a loving kindness practice, which is what we're sort of developing here, there's often an imagined piece. We're imagining a being or this kind of thing, but this is the first in a meditation series of 7, which I'm developing here. And the first one, I wanted to introduce something that was easy to feel compassion for. And what we have is a vague being that is sort of deserving of compassion by its nature. So by imagining it in that way, you don't have a lot of the turbulence that usually arises. So for instance, if you use something else that's imaginary, like someone right? Because at this moment they're imaginary to you. It comes along with it all of the difficulties of the relationship, all of the sort of various challenges, these kind of things. So those will naturally arise. Those aren't a problem, but that's something that often comes up. If you use sort of a harmless being, which is often what people will start with doing a metta practice, often what happens is that there can be nostalgia, or there can be, you know, a variety of things. So what I've liked to do, what I've been enjoying doing, is just knowing that there's this being in front of us that is deserving of kindness, and watching what the system does. So really, you know, anytime we engage in a nurture positive practice, there's some degree of projection into the outside world, and in this case we're projecting in the form of a scooch this sucker over here, in the form of this being. So there's that. Okay, so what else, folks? What else came up? Oh, okay, just Gene, you're saying that your mind and your thoughts very busy today, so a lot of agitation in the system, that kind of thing, and that's fine, actually. I think it's worth knowing that we can still cultivate our practice even if the whole system is moving and active and, you know, jumping around, this kind of thing. It's normal and it's natural. Part of what we want to do is not resist that necessarily, and let the system sort of bounce around in these ways, and we're just returning to the practice over and over again, and the system eventually can cool out. Jamethicus says, I found it fairly difficult to stay with not doing when introducing the visualization and the phrase, but I found the premise quite interesting. Compassion is coming out of simply knowing the other being in that way. That was the goal, and I don't know if that was everyone's experience, but that is basically part of what I want to point to, is that this often we feel like we have to produce kindness, we have to produce all these things, but actually just knowing that something is deserving of it will actually naturally arise out of the system, which is not always the case for everybody, but when it does happen, it's quite incredible. The system itself knows how to give the sort of healing, you know, nature of kindness, which is incredible. It itself knows how to do that. Is extremely transformative. Just the fact that it has that its own sort of knowing about that, this sort of innate compassion. It's very interesting, and ties into some doubts I have had recently. I'd be curious about those doubts. What are those doubts that you've had recently? Yeah, part of the premise is that there can be this sense that we need to sort of hunker down and produce kindness, and actually the system, there's these two models that we've been talking about recently. One is that we need to get something that is not here. In this case, we need to get more kindness. We need to train the system to do this thing that's not happening. Another one is that we need to cultivate what is already there, that nobody scores a 0 on the compassion test. And part of what we're doing is just uncovering and cultivating what is already there. So that's part of the premise of why I guided this in this particular way today. Jamethicus, I'd be very curious about those doubts that you've been having recently. Also, P.S., let's do this. Let me know if you'd like to jump onto our Zoom, and if so, I can jump on there too. And that way we can, anyone, if he wants to, we can chit-chat like kitty cats using voice, which is often quite productive. I'm going to wait. You got to tell me in the chat if you want to jump on there. Just because, I don't know, sometimes when you turn it on, it makes the camera freak out. So, what else? What are the questions, challenges, difficulties, interests, opportunities have been arising for folks? So as folks are continuing your question stream, I just want to mention, maybe you already knew this, I feel a little silly. I'll jump on. Great. I'm going to turn on Zoom. Disney recently released the movie version of Hamilton. We watched it recently. Excellent. Utterly excellent. Very good. Had a great time watching it. Would highly recommend. I'd kind of want to watch it on stream. I don't know if you're allowed to. I forget how it works. Are you allowed to watch things? I know that on YouTube they'll just shut you down instantaneously. But on Twitch, maybe we can watch it. It might be fun. Have a watch party. But I know that that's, yeah, anyway, we'll figure out what the story is. So, Jamethicus, here you are. Okay. Hello. Hello. 1 second here. I have to set this up. okay here. All right, we're transitioning. Excellent, there you are. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Oh, good, you're audible. Okay, everything's set.
It's always good.
Yeah, thanks so much for. Am I pronouncing it correctly, Jimithicus?
Yeah,
Excellent,
yeah.
excellent. So, how can I be helpful? Tell me about these doubts.
So I guess the place that doubt is coming from is like I was introduced to kind of awareness practices and
Mm-hmm.
kind of Neo-Advaita sort of stuff a while ago, and I wanted to kind of learn about that in a Buddhist context. So I
Mm-hmm.
went towards Mahamudra, and they very much seem to associate awareness, this like knowing quality of our being
Mm-hmm.
with compassion. But that's not something which is necessarily intuitive to me.
Yes.
And I kind of think of awareness as being like very neutral, extremely equanimous, and like almost unconcerned with the world.
Uh-huh. Exactly. Yeah,
So,
I totally I have the exact same personal experience. So, my experience was my wife is also a fairly experienced meditation practitioner and teacher, and she would talk about this sort of, the emptiness is universal love. And you've heard about this sort of thing of like, oh, there's just, once you have contact with this, there's a sense of this sort of universal, every piece connecting in this lovely way. And that was just not my experience. And I would describe it, I was like, no, it seems much more like this emptiness is really, really neutral, like so neutral that it's sort of brutal, like it just doesn't care about anything at all. And so what I found over time was that if I wanted to have that kind of universal love quality, that I needed to cultivate that it was not something that sort of just popped up on its own for me. And I find that that's generally the case. People tend to one form of emptiness or the other. And so what we did today is the first, like I mentioned, first in a series of meditations in order to begin to cultivate kind awareness, because it's not just awareness. What the way I'm describing it is kind awareness. Awareness itself is exactly that sort of raw knowing quality, and it's if we talk about it, are you familiar with the jhanas? Is that a sort of range of language that seems familiar?
mhm.
Yeah. So when I learned this particular practice in Burma, they talked about you could do this practice with the jhanas, but you could only get to jhana 3, because in the fourth jhana, which is equanimity, you can't want anything. You can't wish something peace. So there's no capacity to wish peace for that thing because it's just too neutral. So the way that I describe this is if we say that there is this sort of ability to will the world to be a kinder place or a gentler place or more compassionate, this kind of thing. Um, and then there's this threshold where you hit, and then below that you can't, there's no wanting capacity available. What we're actually doing is hanging out at this level right here of between third and fourth jhana, and wishing peace, which is we still have the capacity to, because we're not dipped into the equanimity. But what are we wishing? Well, we're wishing peace. We're wishing that equanimity. We're wishing that deep stillness, that non-preferring, that sort of doorway to emptiness. And in that way, we're sort of in this very thin zone connecting between these two worlds. And for me, all of the spark of creativity and doing and spontaneity, etc., exist in that little tiny space. So there's so much there to explore. And part of the premise also is that the more doing we apply, the harder it is for us to notice the sort of nuance of that little thin sliver. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in terms of jhanas, like, you talking about using metta or like loving
Mm-hmm.
kindness as a concentration object for
Mm-hmm.
doing jhana?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that's traditionally not uncommon. That's traditionally um, that's one of the many sort of concentration objects that can be used. The thing is also though that I'm sort of a big I was you sort of say like a insight addict or something, but it's not. I don't think it's so much addiction, but I tend to highly prefer insight practice over any practice. And so excuse me. Typically, I'll turn every practice into some form of insight practice. So in this case, right now we're doing the setup. It's the first stage in this sort of 7-part series, but the first one is just to notice the contact. But now, if it was available, is just to notice the system itself produces this compassion. And so the thing people will ask, well, what is the object of meditation? Is the object of meditation this imagined being? Not so much. Is the object of meditation the audio in the mind? No, not so much. Is the object of meditation non-doing? Nope, not so much. Not in this case. Well, what is it then? Is it the intending? Because there is a little bit of intending. Maybe that's the object of meditation. Nope, not that. And it seems like a subtle sort of difference, but the object of meditation is the existence of the compassion. It's the equivalent is ringing a bell. So all of the setup that I just described, the non-doing, all of these different pieces, is all the setup. It's all the cause in this case, right? And the cause is moving this one object to come in contact with the other object. And we could say, oh, it's all of these things. It must be the non-doing or the imagining of the other being. But no, it's none of those. It's the presence and existence of the kind awareness as it exists. So it ends up, so as we progress forward, it's the kind awareness that is the object of meditation. It's that quality.
Interesting. My experience was when we were doing when you introduced the visualization, or like the idea, it's not really a visualization, but
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah. I found that the main difference was like a change in the felt sense of the body. So like I have had more feeling around my face and my hands and the front of my body, as if there was something in front of me. So that's interesting. I mean, like, and when the compassion aspect was introduced, I suppose like there's a kind of change in disposition of the, like the felt body or the subtle body.
Yeah, absolutely. That's first of all, I just want to say great sensory clarity, because that's often, it's the kind of nuance that people will just drift away. So what is, I'll describe it in sort of, you're semi-familiar or somewhat familiar Shinzen Young? Yeah. So I'll just describe it in kind of a little bit more in that language. So, proprioception is this relationship of mental imagery, including arrangement and location, this kind of thing, and body sensation. So I describe it as knowing this being. By knowing this being, there's a proprioceptive kind of set of signals that light up, right? It is known spatially. It's in front of. I would categorize it as visualization, because anything that has a location or arrangement or any of that, I'm going to include as the visual mind. So it's in front of us. It is there in that way. And what that does is it lights up the body, because it's not, in part because I'm not asking you to create like a distinguished, like, okay, it has this kind of characteristics, or it was your favorite niece or some child or an animal, which I like doing too. Sometimes we'll do that, but it's indistinct. So because of that, there's less visual detail. So the body kind of takes over and says, okay, well, we'll fill this in emotionally. There is a presence, and so there's a sort of sense of something there. My sense is usually that sense of someone being there, like there's someone near us in a crowded subway or this kind of thing, or someone passes us or this kind of thing. My sense is that is more or less is emotional. If we're looking at different body sensations, like, is that sensation hunger when someone passes us and our eyes are closed and we detect them? Not so much. Is it temperature? Probably not. Maybe if they're really hot and sweaty. Is it digestion? Is it respiration? Is it circulation? Is it gravity? Is it aches and pains in the body? You start crossing all these things off the list, and at some point what you're left with is, well, maybe it's this other physical sensation, which is emotion. And especially if you get used to really, really granular, noticing emotion in a granular way, you start to say, yeah, that is pretty close to emotion. It's a pretty neutral emotion, but often it's emotional in nature. And then the thing that you said, the disposition shift that happens, that is, from my experience at least, like categorically emotional. It is this emotional system, the limbic system, lighting up, and The subtlety though is very there's a high level of subtlety, because usually we notice emotion when it's kind of pretty active, pretty hot. Like PT in the body or joy or this kind of thing is often very active, very vibratory, very sort of noticeable. And the care and the sort of compassion is incredibly subtle. It can be like, it's like you can look at actually equanimity as an emotional rest. It's low to no emotion, so there's a way in which it can feel restful in that way. And so because we're kind of sitting right on that edge, the compassion can be very, very subtle, and in that subtlety we can notice a lot of nuance. So yeah, that's the same thing you said with a bunch more words.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's like kind of feel in Shinzen words, like that emotional body sensation.
Yeah. Yeah. And feel in just meaning that it's our subjective emotional experience. But I found over time, through really carefully observing feel in emotion in the body, is that it's much, much more prevalent and constant than we're used to. It's just coloring all of our experiences all the time. It's the like right now the camera doesn't care if it was completely dark or if it's looking at a human face. It doesn't care. And it's hard for us to recognize, like, we care about everything, like a color, a change, a sort of texture, if something's moving towards or away. So over time we can start to actually get tuned in enough in the emotional body to recognize it's constantly pushing and pulling all the time. There's a if are you familiar with the electric eel, how they work and hunt?
Yeah, as in actual electric eels.
Eel, yeah, actual. Which it's crazy, because if folks don't know, they can detect the electrical sort of arrangement of other animals in their body. They can feel the electrical currents in their body, so they know where to strike. They don't see anything. They just can detect the electrical currents, and they can strike at that being. I think they actually strike with electricity, I think is actually the case. And it seems like that's insane. Like, it's not looking at another being, it's detecting it in its body. And it seems like sort of like that seems so impressive. But the fact that we're doing that all the time, not just with other bodies in order to just to eat, we're doing that all the time with like a preference of like which instantaneously, like, which does the system prefer, this plastic remote or this bronze bell. And for each person it might be different, but the system will just lean towards one or the other. And that's not logic. We're not sitting here and weighing and measuring. It's like, well, technically, the system just like pushes and pulls. So there's all this subtle I hate to say energy, but all this subtle material sort of pushing and pulling in the system.
Awesome. Yeah, I've sometimes felt like that with the, if you go back to the suttas, they don't really talk about emotions as such. They talk about chitta, or like mind, heart.
Yep.
And what I find interesting is that mind and heart are one thing. Yep. So like, in a sense, all of the emotions that you're having at current, like your emotional state or your mind state, is all encompassed in this chitta.
Yep.
And that's influencing everything that you see. And like, it's like a filter through which you view the whole world.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's interesting because, I mean, just sort of talking about like old definitions and how we relate to those now, it's weird because I found over time that each definition that I invest in is extremely valuable and limited. Like, it has like, oh, it's so great, and I really explore, and then it reaches this point where it just sort of reaches its max. I typically find that Shinzen system is extremely useful for me personally, and really tuning into emotion as a body sensation is extremely effective, especially for having a more fulfilling life. Especially if that's our goal, which for me it tends to be more about fulfillment than sort of cool psychedelic effects, which are also lovely. So where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so for Shinzen, emotion is 90-something% body. It's just body sensation. And then there's this question which you had mentioned, which is around mind states, which is this filter of the world, which can be detected in any sense experience. If we're really frustrated or really feeling hopeless or really whatever, things look hopeless. They taste hopeless. It's everywhere, and it's this continuous filter. And for a long time I struggled thinking, where do mind states fit in? Because I taught a whole retreat on mind states, and at the time really thinking of them as sort of maybe another category that Shinzen, doesn't cover somehow. Like maybe this isn't covered. Again, this isn't like an advertisement for Shinzen, but I was trying to navigate this material. And lately I've actually been coming to this place where I think that my sense is mind states are constellations of see, hear, feel, of mental, audio, video, and emotion that are below the threshold of consciousness. And they're constellations in that they're so familiar. We've had them a million times, and they just come into place immediately. If you think about, like, I don't know, something like patriotism, or something where you, or some, a charged word right now, like police, right? It's like the system will light up pretty quickly, and part of that is emotional, maybe there's some mental imagery, etc. But on a very subtle level, often below the level of the threshold of consciousness, is this arrangement of these different pieces that come into shape, and they can shape our entire sensory field. So that's my current sort of phenomenological estimation of where I think mind states fit.
Cool.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's always I think it's always a little nerve-wracking to jump onto the Zoom, but I think we often can hit some pretty interesting stuff. So thank you so much. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Cheers.
Awesome. Okay, so before we slide away into the night, which I actually have to, I'm going to have to do, because I got to make sure you have an appointment coming up. What else? Any other questions or reports, difficulties, challenges before we hit the eject button? We will be back here, by the way. We were away traveling, and so we'll be back here on Friday, fewer than 48 hours. I just want to also mention for Farzad, or anyone else who's joining, also Nate, pretty sure right now we're planning on switching everything to Twitch. Just various conflicts and details. We're probably just going to slide everything over. So live stream will go dark unless you're over here on Twitch with us. If you'd like to come on over, you can follow. And the following makes it possible for you to know when we go live, which right now we go live 3 days a week, but we might be doing some more. Might be doing some watch parties, having some fun, that kind of thing. What else, folks? What else is coming up? No pressure. We can also just transition into our lives. Okay, folks, so I have a wish for you. A wish for you in your life. And the wish is simply this: that it can be known from your own personal experience that there are beings, whether they're ones you know or don't know, that are deserving of kindness, that their very existence is an indication and an expression of their deserving nature. Just beginning to train the system that this is the case. We don't have to apply it to ourselves necessarily yet. We don't have to apply it to our most difficult people. We don't have to apply it to anything. So my wish is simply in this particular moment right now, right here, that you are open to the fact that beings exist who are worthy of kindness. So look forward to seeing everyone soon. We'll be back here in fewer than 48 hours. Looking forward to connecting. As always, feel free to drop a line if you have any questions. And we look forward to chatting with you soon. Okay.